Hi everyone. I wanted to share some ideas around setting up a security design for a Salesforce project. Just some tips and tricks I've learned over the years. So it's not the only way to do it. It is the best way in my opinion, but take it for what it's worth. So when I begin a project where I'm looking at setting up new users in a Salesforce system, this is how I go about it. First, you identify the personas. So this is just individuals who work at a company. What do they do? For our example, I'm keeping it pretty simple. We've got system administrators who are configuring Salesforce. They have super access to the org. We have our sales reps, very simple implementation of a quick sales cloud. And then we have executives. So it could be sales managers, C-suite leadership, etc. Overall visibility into the system. Those are very general personas. Then we kind of keep track of, okay, what profiles we're going to give them, what permission set groups, what roles, etc. So oftentimes my profiles mirror my personas. So in this case, they do. System admin, sales rep, executive. My roles, jumping over here to this tab, very simple. Just keeping it pretty flat, executive and staff. So 2 levels in our role hierarchy, very easy. Why we use roles, we won't get into it, but there's also a link here for some best practices when setting up roles for your organization. I won't go through it, but a lot of very good points in here. I will put a link to this spreadsheet in the description for this video, so you guys can have it for reference. I have a notes tab here with just some general guidelines, best practices. These are published, and I've come up with certain things over the years. So what should be in your profiles? Not a lot, as little as possible, to be honest with you. Minimum access profiles. You do need it to default your record types in your apps. You need it for page layout assignments, login hours, IP ranges. Classes and Visualforce pages, you actually don't need that in there anymore. At one point you did. It's come a long way. You can put them now in permission sets, which we should do. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and move that down here, and then I'll clean it up later. Okay, now, so what should be in our permission sets? Well, your system permissions, all your object, record type, and field level security should be in there. I do have a note here. We usually grant read-write access to all of our fields unless we have special requirements not to do that. So certain users should see financial fields, other users won't. That's very granular, and you'll have to organize that separately. I don't, within this spreadsheet, keep track of field level security. I only use the org itself. There's thousands of checkboxes and such to set that properly, so I don't try to do that in Excel. You can also put your connected app access, tab settings, custom permissions, Apex classes, and Visualforce pages. I guess I'll add a row here for flow access and flow user, which is an app setting. You put that in here as well. Used to be able to just, you'll see this on the user record, you can say flow user. That's one way to do it. You don't need to do that anymore. You can control it via an app setting. It can be done in a profile, it can be done in a permission set. I like to keep things in a permission set. A lot easier to maintain where you're controlling the configurations in one spot. If you leverage groups, which I highly recommend, permission set groups, and then put your permission sets within those groups, it just makes the maintainability and scalability of your solution a lot easier. Some general approaches. I already mentioned the field level security is going to be done at the permission set level. And then also, if we're doing this, when you create new fields on your objects, as you're going through the wizard, it'll prompt you for what profiles do you want to give access to, and you can do like read access, read write access. There's a setting under setup user management settings where you can enable field level security for permission sets during field creation. So this will show you the list of permission sets instead of the list of profiles. So if we're going with this approach, we'll want to enable that setting just so every time you create a field, it's for permission sets, you define it, not the profiles. We will define object access and system custom app permissions separately. I'll show you a little bit more about that on the permission sets tab in a second. Permission set groups make your life easier. You don't really need it if you've only got a couple of permission sets, not that big of a deal, but as your solution grows and you enhance new features, your permission set list is going to grow. Just use permission set groups from the start. I mentioned there's so many settings and field level security within our permission sets. I don't configure exactly what is in there. I don't try to design that or maintain that through the spreadsheet. That's directly in the system. Here's a note, kind of a warning. Salesforce allows you to do permission set grouping or muting, so you can basically take away access. I don't think that's a great idea. I say if you get to this point, your original design probably morphed, and who knows, maybe there's a lot of solution architects in there at one point, and not everybody was on the same page. So you can achieve your goals by taking away permissions through muting, but it's not how Salesforce was intended to be used, and you'll get into trouble. If you need to do any reporting to say who has access to what from your compliance department, you're in big trouble because you can't really report on muted permissions. In general, the admin group, permission set group, we're just going to give it all the permission sets. So for your system administrators, you're going to assign your admin permission set group. It's kind of overkill. You don't really need this because the system administrator profile, it's got a lot of permissions and access already. So it's a bit redundant giving it all the permission sets. But as you implement custom things, custom logic, other settings, it's defaulted to always give it to your administrators. So they're never without access. Just a policy. And when you're explaining it to your business, it makes sense that your system administrators kind of have the highest level of access in the system. So now we talked about our personas, some overall approaches. Our profiles, not much different than our personas. Profiles are a technical artifact within Salesforce, so you absolutely have to have them. Personas are just a general concept that we're applying to logically organize our people that we're going to put in the system. So in this case, system admins, sales reps, executives, our profiles exactly mirror our personas. If I go back to the persona tab, this is the name of the persona. These are their profiles. Not too creative. Now for all of our, actually I'm going to skip over to permission set groups. These are similar, admin, sales rep, executive, and then you can see here what permission sets do each of these groups contain. Our admins are going to have all of them. Our sales reps are going to have the least amount, and then the executives, which are kind of in between administrators and sales reps, they get a little bit more access than our sales reps themselves. When I go into this permission sets tab, you define all of your permission sets that you're going to use. Notice the type. So I have a few types that I use: object, system, custom, and app. So when it's object, the main purpose of these are you're going to define object level access and field level security within them. The reason we separate these out instead of combining our object and our system permissions is just it's easier to organize, it's easier to design, and it's easier to apply to different people when the time arises. So in our example, the executive object modify all access is just that. It gives them read, create, edit, delete access, and modify all to accounts, contacts, leads, and opportunities. We're specifying. It's not modify all like our system administrators get. It's object specific. Then we've got one for the sales reps, object, edit, and create access, and then just read-only access. Again, we're talking about our Sales Cloud implementation, account, contact, leads, and opportunities, for example. Next, we get into some of our system permissions. So these are custom permission sets, and you can see by the name pretty much what they're doing. So API enabled, allow access to the activities, certain homepage access, lead conversion, lightning experience. And these are what we're changing, our system level permissions. So while you're into modifying your permission set, there's like a system permissions area, a bunch of checkboxes with giving them system level rights to various activities. That's what we have here. There is kind of a naming convention going on where object, system, and they match to the type. You don't need that. It's just how this example worked out. Then we get into our custom things. If we were ever write custom permissions themselves, we'd want to tie them to a permission set. It would be like a custom permission set. In this case, we're creating custom code. So custom code is Apex and our Visualforce pages. You need to assign access to that. It's pretty easy if you only have one permission set. Every time you create a class, just put it in your permission set. This goes to all of our groups or the groups that it's appropriate for. Typically, it's all of them because most of your users will want to be able to execute this code. Then you can also apply the same logic to flows. So custom flow access is if they're not a flow user, you haven't given them the app permission to run all active flows, you want to granularly configure who has access to what flows. You could go with this approach. The app run flow access is, there's an app setting that you would check to say, grant access to the to all active flows in the system. So if this user has that app permission enabled, they could run all active flows. This is the same as clicking flow user on their user record. Just gives us more granularity of how we want to do it. Typically don't use both of these. I'm just putting them in here for illustrative purposes. So now that we have our permission sets identified, and this is a typical example of a Sales Cloud implementation, we come over to our matrix. So this is where we define what objects we're using, the org-wide default, our sharing settings, and then I do put in, maybe I'm overcomplicating it, what apps that I'm using, because I want to know what tabs are included in what app, and then we get into the object specific, the CRUD permissions, view all, modify, etc. So we've got on our first column, our primary column, what's the org-wide default, and then it goes across. What apps are we considering? This is kind of hypothetical. I just come up with custom sales app. Then we get into our permission sets, and we had like 15 permission sets defined, but only 3 that are of the object type. So that means I only care about setting the CRUD permissions for these permission sets. Just helps simplify this spreadsheet. So now we'll go across the top and down. So we're talking about accounts, contacts, leads, opportunities, and quotes. These are all private. That's our design. In our custom app, we want all these tabs. So there's a yes to all these tabs. And then when we get into each permission set per object, we talk about what it is. So for this executive object, modify all access. For the account, including person accounts, they're going to get create, read, edit, and modify all for the account object. Do we define tab visibility for this? Yes, that's what this Y means. And that configuration applies across the board for all of these objects. And then similarly for our next permission set, it's a edit and create. We're giving them create, read, edit, view all. So they can view all accounts in the system. They see the tab. That's what's in parentheses, this Y. If we wanted to take away a tab visibility, we would just change that to no, to N. And then we define the same thing for our read only, but they're getting read and view all. This is how we do it. And as you build out your project, you're just going to keep adding columns, If you need to get into maybe we had other personas, like we were doing a field service type implementation. We had field technicians. Well, there's probably going to be some, instead of sales rep or executives, there's going to be field tech, read only, field tech, modify all, whatever we want to come up with. And it's to your discretion of what permission sets you have and how you break them apart. This is just a good way to keep track of it. And then we talked a little bit about roles already. So that was pretty much it. If you start with this approach, it scales really, really well. You can build extra features onto your system. You can onboard new departments, so new groups of users within Salesforce. And you start by just defining, okay, what is that? All right, well, we're implementing a new thing called Salesforce contracts. Well, that involves the legal team. That involves the finance team. So you start identifying these different personas, put in your descriptions. Okay, do we have an appropriate profile already? Probably not. We'd have to create that. What about the permission set groups, the objects, systems, app, custom things? Do we have the appropriate roles? So you start with all the personas, and then you kind of flip to these other tabs to identify what additional artifacts do you need to configure the proper level of access. This is just an intro. There's a lot more you can do it with sharing rules, Apex sharing, those sorts of things. But I hope this helps, and I'd love to hear some feedback, so leave a comment below, and check out the description for a link to the spreadsheet. Thank you.